Welcome everyone to another episode of the Practical SQL Server HA show. Putting the banner over there. My name is Edwin Sarmiento. I'm a high availability and disaster recovery expert. I have been, if you've been following along and you've been watching some of the episodes before, I have been covering topics pertaining to high availability and disaster recovery, solutions, implementations. Although I specialize in SQL Server high availability and disaster recovery, the concepts that I cover here and the topics that I cover here apply to just about any high availability and disaster recovery solutions and implementations, right? And it's interesting because I also get feedback from the people who have been watching my episodes. Also, my clients, I get really good use cases, not just their use cases, but my own personal experiences in bringing in practical and actionable I don't want to say advice, but insights as well, because it's one thing to have an advice, but it's one thing that you to come up with an insight that you can apply specifically to your own scenario or your use case or your environment in particular. Today, I want to talk about the unwritten expectations that come with HADR solutions. Businesses have evolved. In fact, one of the things that I use as a metric, I don't know, I came up with a metric a long time ago. Uh, if you've if you've been in the tech industry for quite a while, Intel's a former Intel CEO came up with the idea of Moore's law, like the speed at which the computing devices or the computational power increases exponentially. I came up with I don't know what I'm going to call it, but I came up with this couple of years ago, that I look at how businesses evolve and grow, and the way I look at it is by evaluating and analyzing the volume of their data, and not just data, right? Because anybody can collect as much data. I mean, we all collect photos, videos, documents. We store them on our hard drives, but do we actually pay attention to them? So I kind of look at it from a business point of view, where the more that the data of a business grows, transactional data that pertains to their customers, their revenue, the more it grows, the more that the business also grow alongside with it. And as businesses evolve and as businesses grow together with the data, there is a need to implement high availability and disaster recovery solutions. It's no longer an afterthought, although most people think, oh, we can survive without an HA solution. Sure, you can. But just like insurance policies, you don't really need healthcare until you need it, right? You don't need healthcare insurance until you desperately need it. And so this has become a requirement. So now more and more businesses are implementing high availability and disaster recovery solutions. It's no longer an afterthought. But beyond implementing the technology, the solution, the product, the feature, there are some unwritten expectations when you're implementing a high availability solution. Most of the time, I get brought into a consulting project, talking to customers. They would ask me, hey, can you help me build X, whatever that X could be? It could be always on availability groups. It could be implementing a hybrid solution between on-premises and cloud. And it could be failover clustered instances, or evaluating their existing infrastructure. But more often than not, it's more than just the technical solutions, the features. And that's why I want to talk about the unwritten expectations. As businesses evolve, as industries evolve as well, there are unwritten. I actually came up with a title, an I don't say unwritten, but hidden expectations. These are expectations that come with implementing a high availability and or disaster recovery solution. So it's no longer just, hey, build an availability group, we'll put the databases in an availability group, and that's it, right? There are unspoken, unwritten, hidden expectations that come with this. Well, why don't we dive into it? Get your pen and paper ready. I got my notes down here. take notes as much as you can. I want to cover three things. The first thing, unwritten expectations, hidden, um, I forgot what the other word I'm looking for. Number one is regulatory requirements. So it's not enough for you to have a high availability solution. These regulatory requirements would add on to your existing solution. One example of this is if you're in the finance industry, where data security is of utmost importance. Your PII data, personally identifiable information, if you're storing that kind of information in your databases or inside your data platforms, you need to factor that in. And of course, in the process of you looking at high availability and or disaster recovery solution, somebody might not be telling you that directly. They'll just say, okay, we need an HA solution. But because you are in an industry that regulates data or has specific compliance requirements for data handling or data storage, you need to factor that in, even though nobody's talking about it, even though it's not directly mentioned in the project plan. One client that I worked with a couple of years ago, they're in the healthcare industry, and they have an AG, or an availability group solution, that is already on premises, and they want to move it to the cloud. First question that I asked was, well, how are you dealing with PII data, or in their case, PHI data? Because moving stuff from on premises to the cloud, you have to think about what are the regulatory requirements that I need to consider. It's not just, sure, let's build an availability group on the cloud, or let's build a failover cluster on the cloud across multiple availability zones or availability regions. It's more than just that. It's considering what other things do I need to factor into that. Now, it's different to build an HA solution, for instance, an availability group. I'll just use availability groups in this example and throughout. It's different building an availability group where your databases are not encrypted, where you don't have TDE, versus building an availability group and then layering TDE on top of that. Or maybe you already have transparent data encryption, and then you decide we want to build an availability group solution or an HA solution with an existing TDE layered on our databases, because now it starts complicating how you would implement your HA solution, how you would deal with outage situations, how you would deal with even collecting data from your monitoring tools, right? Every industry will have different regulatory and compliance requirements. So even if nobody's explicitly mentioning that in your HA solution or your project plan when you're implementing a new HA solution, you gotta factor that in. Data privacy laws. We're trying to protect the data. Are we allowing? Just the app to connect to the database, or are we allowing all users to connect to the database? How are we implementing some form of access control list? And these are things that you have to, again, unwritten, hidden expectations. But if you're in a certain industry, they come with it, right? They come with it, especially now with news about cybersecurity hacks, with data getting compromised. People are now, and companies are now becoming more and more vigilant with protecting their data. So it's more than just, again, building a high availability solution. You're layering data security, data privacy, and in addition to that is data management lifecycle. I like talking about data management lifecycle because, for one, we don't think about the entire lifecycle of the data. As the business grows, like I mentioned in the beginning, as businesses grow, their data also grows with it. Back in the days, you may be able to be okay with a 400 gigabyte size database. 15 years later, or maybe 5 years later, that 400 gigabyte size database is now 4 terabytes. How are you managing the data? Because now when you're looking at taking a backup of a 400 gigabyte size database versus a 4 terabyte size database versus a 40 terabyte size database, the the maintenance window is now different, right? A 400 gigabyte size database might take what, 10-15 minutes, depending on how good your storage subsystem is, how good the compute resources are within your SQL Server instance, versus a 4 terabyte size database versus 40 terabyte size database. So now you have to think about, how do I meet my recovery point and recovery time objectives as my data grows? And this is part of your regulatory requirements. There are certain industries that would tell you, we want to make sure that data is kept archived within X amount of years. I use tax records as an example. Depending on where you're from, there are certain regulations where if you're keeping data when it comes to tax records, you have to archive or keep everything within a span of 7 years, keep it active, and then archive that ready for retrieval anytime possible. So that the way you manage that data, and some people, some data professionals call it hot or cold data, where hot data is anything that you use, and any data that is current, or in this case, within the last 7 years. And then cold data is anything that's older than 7 years. So when you're implementing a high availability and disaster recovery solution, you now have to start thinking about, do we keep them in the same database, or do we archive them within the same database but on a different file group or on a different storage subsystem? And then what do we do after that? Do we archive them to tape? How do we retrieve them in case we need them back onto the main instance? And these are things, again, part of the regulatory requirements that people are not even mentioning. They're not even talking about, but they're there. Part of regulatory requirements. What else? I mentioned data privacy, data security, data management lifecycle. I mean, even a simple taking a backup from your HA solution. Typically, what we do with developers, they would ask for a copy of production database so that they can either fix a bug, work on a feature. Even the idea of taking an ad hoc backup so that we can give them to developers comes with it the regulatory requirements of, how do we handle those data, right? Do we just give the data to the developers and then let them run with it? Or do we have some policies in place to make sure that we also scramble the data before we even give it to them, so that we don't accidentally compromise the data, or the developers might compromise the data, right? We're not even looking at that. And the fact that, taking an ad hoc backup breaks the log sequence chain. So now your differential or your log backups will now have to depend on that full database backup ad hoc that you've taken, that you've given to developers. Again, these are regulatory requirements depending on what industry you're in, depending on what special security compliance requirements that your business and your industry is in. You will need to factor all of these within your HA and DR solution, right? I know I've spent a little bit more time on that because, again, sometimes it's kind of like an expectation. If you work in healthcare, if you work in legal, if you work in finance, there are certain expectations because this is the industry that we're working in. Like in my case, as a data professional coming in, I need to sign several documents that state I'm not supposed to touch PII or PHI data, anything that is covered by HIPAA regulations, even though I'm only supposed to be doing HA and DR work with a specific client or customer, right? So that's number one. Number two, yes, regulatory requirements is number one. Number two is response time, or SLA, right? This is an unwritten expectation, response time. And it's kind of frustrating because especially now in the days of chatbots and AI bots, where they're being incorporated into support processes, meaning level one line of support where you get an alert, tickets are created. Back then, uh, these are humans forwarding tickets to corresponding levels, right? Um, Nowadays, monitoring tool would then send an alert. The alert gets forwarded to a ticketing system. Ticketing system uh, automatically creates a ticket, and then based on where the servers are, or what category of the servers are, what apps are running on those servers, either a human, a person, level one support would do a quick assessment of the ticket and immediately forward them to certain levels depending on the escalation process. This is part of an unwritten expectation. How long is it going to take for an issue to get resolved, especially when we're looking at both recovery point, recovery time objectives, and SLA? The challenge here comes when the first line of support isn't really aware of what is going on. They're not aware, they're not educated, they're unfamiliar with the environment. And so what ends up happening is an incident might be created, or a ticket might be created based on an incident. They'll just look at keywords and forward the ticket to corresponding person. It's fine if it's not a mission critical system. If you don't have a mission critical high availability solution, that's fine. They can wait for like 4 hours, 8 hours, 2 days, no big deal. But if you have a mission critical system and it's a high availability solution and you know every second counts, you have to make sure that your first line of support, level one, knows exactly what the SLAs are. Because every second counts. If you have a 2-hour SLA or a 2-hour RTO and you have an outage, who is going to respond to that? And if that automatically goes to your first line of support, meaning your level one people or your tech support people, are they aware of your recovery time objectives and your SLA? Because if they're not aware of that, well, they'll probably just go grab some coffee. All right, go grab some coffee. Go take a break for a while, and then when they come back, they'll escalate properly, right? They have to be aware. Response time and SLA needs to be communicated to the first line of support. Not only that, even if this is an automated thing where an alert comes in, ticketing system creates the ticket and automatically forwards that um, to level 2 or level 3, immediately level 2 or level 3 because of the criticality, you need to clearly identify that this is severity 1. Even if it's an automated response where it creates a ticket, you have to specifically say, because again, we're humans. I've had cases where my mailbox is full and I don't have time to process everything, so I do a Control A, Shift Delete for all the email alerts and silence my pager because I wasn't aware that these are mission critical. And this is key, right? Communicating and setting the expectations on the response time or the SLA for anybody who is going to get those alerts is very important. It is an unwritten expectation, right? The more critical an HA solution is, the clearer the expectation should be. And you also need to make sure that it's more than just setting the expectation and setting clear expectations, but also managing those expectations. If somebody does not respond to a critical alert, find out, did we not categorize the alert immediately or in the beginning? Did we not define the proper escalation procedures? Did we not define the proper response time and SLA? Did we not define the proper escalation process, or who needs to get who needs to be contacted for this issue to be escalated to? Right? These are things that have again, they're not clear cut. When you're building a new high availability solution, it's not clear cut. All that most people think about is it's up and running, we've gone live, it's in production, go figure, right? Especially if you're deploying this if you're deploying HA solutions with the help of either a managed services provider, an outside consultant, a contractor, and they're temporary, meaning at the end of the project, they're gone. If the team who's responsible for managing this, for the operational staff, if they're not clear on SLA, they're not clear on response time, they don't know what to do. So setting that expectation. The third one, and this ties back to number 2, which is expectations or unwritten expectations about response time and SLA. Number 3 is all about competent and skilled staff. Competent and skilled staff. It's not enough for you to have uh, an HA solution in place. You also need to make sure that you have competent people, skilled people who are capable of dealing with potential issues that this specific platform that you're building, um, uh, they have the capability to manage this. If there are issues, or if there are outages, if there are unexpected problems that may happen, and it's not just about having competent and skilled people. It has to be a combination of both available and capable. I always emphasize that it has to be both. What good are available people? Like for instance, level 1 support, right? Again, no disrespect to the people who are on level 1 support. They're there 24/7. Shifts come and go. People are there to respond to tickets. But what good are available people if they're not capable? They just know how to handle tickets, but the issue still remains. If that's an outage, the servers, the databases are still unavailable, they're offline. And on the other hand, what good are capable, expert, subject matter expert people who are really, 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 really good at what they do if they're not available? Maybe they're traveling. Maybe they're on the other side of the world attending conferences, because they do attend conferences like Microsoft Ignite or the past Data Community Summit. Maybe they're calling it sick because they're not available. Maybe their phone died. Maybe a couple of different things. What good are really good people who are expert in their field, but you cannot get a hold of them? You cannot contact them. You cannot bring them in to resolve the issue. So it has to be both. It has to be capable and available. And this is an unwritten, it's a hidden expectation. Yeah, we have a high availability solution. Well, if it's a 24/7 solution that needs proper care and feeding, we definitely need to have people on staff that are both available and capable to do this on a 24/7 basis. And I don't mean just you alone. Some people would say, hey, I'm the only guy who knows about availability groups, or who knows about failover clustering. Well, unlucky you, because you're going to go to sleep, you're going to eat, you're going to go on vacation, you're going to go and have your sick days, or maybe you're going to decide to leave the company. So how can a 24/7 HA solution be sustained if there are no 24/7 available and capable staff to start managing all of these things and supporting it down the road? It's again, I've seen so many cases where a consultant would come in, they would build the entire environment and then hand it off to the operations team, not really sure whether or not the operations team has the capability to manage this. And that's one of the reasons why whenever a customer would bring me in and do a design and implement a high availability solution, this is one of the things that I ask them: do you have capable team that can pick this up immediately after deploying it in production? Because after we go live, I'm only going to be there for a couple more days and then I'm gone. If you don't have anybody on your team ready to pick this up, start running with it after production go live, then there's no point. That's why I would always, and I say always, make sure that the operations team, whether that's the DBA team, the sysadmin team, the Windows team, anybody involved with building this entire solution, they're properly trained, they're capable, they know what to do if something goes wrong. So that before we even cut over to production, they know that once I hand it off to them, they know exactly what to do, right? So these are the three things that are unwritten expectations, hidden expectations when you're implementing, or you already have an HADR solution, but then business keeps evolving as part of it. Number one, it are is regulatory requirements. Be very familiar with the regulatory requirements that are part of whatever industry that you're working in. Uh, that comes in by default, which means it's not just implementing a specific SQL Server high availability and or disaster recovery solution. You have to layer that with whatever regulatory requirements that your industry has. Maybe TDE in SQL Server with availability groups, or backup encryption with availability groups, or shipping backups to tape, but the tapes are encrypted, or copying backups from production to development and making sure that the data is scrambled. All of these things factor into the unwritten expectations. And number two is response time, or SLA. Once your high availability solution is already in production, you have to be clear about what are we promising? What's the SLA? What's the response time? And the people on the front lines, your level one support, your tech support, your help desk people, the ones that are that are either creating the tickets and escalating, or the ones that are escalating, just escalating the tickets, need to be aware of the response time and the SLA, because when an incident happens, the clock starts ticking, and then your recovery time objective is now running. So you got to be aware, and they have to be aware, and setting that expectations. It also comes knowing the proper escalation process, right? In addition to response time, SLA, also the proper escalation process, and who to escalate this. This needs to be properly communicated to the team doing operations. And number three, which ties back to number two, is competent and skilled staff. Not only should they be capable, they should also be available. When you are deploying a 24/7 mission critical high availability solution, you gotta make sure that you have the right people with the right skills and are available, capable and available. It's not enough for them to be just available but not capable, or capable but not available. They have to be both. So you have to prepare for that, because this is an expectation. If something goes wrong, you gotta have the right people in place, make sure that they solve the problem, address an issue, resolve an outage, and they have to be available, right? That's about it for this week's episode of the Practical SQL Server HADR show. Tune in again for next episode, where I talk about practical SQL Server high availability and disaster recovery lessons, topics that a lot of people don't pay attention to, especially tech professionals, because we are so fixated on the tech, the features, the implementation, while sidetracking or sidestepping a lot of these things because we're not aware of them in the first place. And if you do need help, maybe you're implementing a new high availability solution, or you're planning on implementing a high availability solution and you're not sure where to start, what to do, use that link on the screen, schedule a strategy session. Let's have that conversation where I would guide you through the process of not just discovery, but also figuring out what needs to be done and then what the next steps could be, right? Or maybe you don't have capable staff on board, and you already have a high availability solution and you're not sure whether your staff is ready for that. Let's have that conversation. I also, like I said, part of what I do in my consulting practice is not just provide and implement those solutions, design and implement them, but also prepare the engineers, the operational staff, to make sure that they are more than capable of handling such a solution. Again, use that link on the screen, schedule a strategy session, and let's have that conversation. More than happy to help in any way I can. That's about it again for this week's episode. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you again in the next episode.